You know what I love about One Piece? It's not just the epic battles or the insane powers. It's those moments when a character gets absolutely disrespected. Not just defeated, embarrassed. Like Oda's way of reminding us, yeah, your favorite character? They're not ready for the monsters at the top yet. From Kaido flattening Luffy with a single swing, to Kizaru styling on the supernovas at Sabaody like they were nothing, these fights aren't about strength alone. They're about dominance, and right when you think you've seen it all, Oda throws in a clash so sudden, so brutal, that the entire fan base is left speechless. Shanks one-shots Kid. Kid came to Elbaf with fire in his eyes, building up his ultimate railgun, damned punk, to wipe out Shanks' allies and force the Yonko into battle. But Shanks wasn't waiting. With his observation haki, he saw the destruction that attack would cause. And he ended it before it began. One slash. Kamusari. Kid and Killer collapsed in the same instant. The Kid Pirates begged for mercy, but Shanks turned away. Then the giants, Dory and Brogy, fired Hakoku, shattering the Victoria Punk and sinking Kid's ambitions with it. In moments, a rising star was erased, not by a war, but by a reminder of the gulf between dreamers and emperors. And if that's power-crushing pride, the next moment is about fear itself, when a single slash makes an enemy too terrified to even move. Zoro versus Monet. On Punk Hazard, Monet was in her element. A Logia who turned the air into a blizzard and froze her enemies with ease. Marines fell back, Tashigi struggled, and for a moment, it looked like the Straw Hats were in real danger. Then Zoro stepped forward. No speeches, no wasted motion. Just calm, steady eyes that said, "You're out of your depth." Monet tried to stand her ground, but terror gripped her. She was already trembling, her confidence shattered, and with just one slash, Zoro ended any illusion she had of fighting back. She should have reformed instantly. Logias don't fear cuts, but Monet froze, trembling, unable to put herself back together. Zoro hadn't even used haki. He'd simply shown her how dead she'd be if he wanted it. Zoro sheathed his blade and walked away. No need to finish her. The fight was already over, because her spirit was gone. And if fear alone can end a battle, sometimes all it takes is one punch to erase a man's pride in front of the world. Luffy versus Bellamy. Bellamy mocked dreams. To him, Sky Islands were a joke, and people who believed in them were fools. In Jaya, he laughed at Luffy, called him a child chasing fantasies. When the fight finally came, the crowd expected a brawl, but Luffy didn't waste words. He stood tall, clenched his fist, and swung once. That was it. No drawn-out struggle, no flashy finish, just a single punch that silenced an entire tavern and proved that dreams don't die just because someone mocks them. But humiliation doesn't always come from a fist. Sometimes, it's a frozen finger that stops even the most dangerous pirate cold. Aokiji freezes Doflamingo. On Punk Hazard, Smoker was moments away from being finished. Doflamingo loomed over him, strings ready, grinning like a predator. Then the air grew heavy, frost curling over the ground. Aokiji walked in, calm, quiet, but carrying a chill that silenced the room. Doflamingo moved to strike, but before he could, the temperature dropped in a flash. Ice crawled across his body, locking him in place as if the fight had ended before it began. That was the humiliation, a warlord of the sea, frozen still without even a proper clash. Aokiji didn't posture, didn't even look angry. He just showed that sometimes the difference in level is so vast, the fight isn't worth his time. And if that kind of cold precision can stop Doflamingo, then what chance does Rage have against a monster who calls himself the strongest creature in the world? Kaido one-shots Luffy. Wano began with fire in Luffy's chest. He'd seen Kaido terrorize the land, he'd watched his friends suffer, and he wasn't holding back. Luffy went all in, gear forth, fists blazing, determined to land a blow that would shake even the so-called strongest creature alive. For a moment, it worked. Luffy's hits connected, Kaido stumbled, the ground cracked, the Straw Hats and Samurai dared to hope. Then Kaido stood tall, unimpressed, unshaken. He raised his Kanabo. One swing, Thunder Bagua. The strike was so fast, Luffy's eyes rolled back before he even hit the ground. The captain of the Straw Hats, who had defied Marineford and punched a celestial dragon, was knocked unconscious in an instant. No struggle, no second round, just humiliation. A reminder that in Wano, Kaido wasn't just an enemy. He was an unscalable mountain. But if one strike can end a captain's charge, what happens when a child's tantrum wipes out the pride of an entire warrior race? Young Big Mom versus Elbaf. Elbaf, the land of giants, the proudest warriors on the seas. For generations, they stood as living legends. But the day a little girl named Linlin arrived, their pride was shattered. At first, she was just another orphan under Carmel's care. But when hunger pangs struck, Linlin lost control. Her small frame became a force of pure destruction, a child's tantrum with the strength of a monster. Even the mightiest warriors couldn't stop her. Ural, one of Elbaf's greatest heroes, fell under her rampage. A giant cut down not by a rival warrior, but by the uncontrollable hunger of a child. Homes crumbled, warriors fled, and the proud village of Elbaf was left in ruins. The giants, once feared across the seas, were humiliated, not by an army, but by a little girl who didn't even understand the destruction she caused. Sometimes disrespect doesn't come with arrogance, it comes with inevitability. And no one understood that better than a man who smiled while tearing apart his enemies. Doflamingo versus Law. For Trafalgar Law, Dressrosa was personal. Every step toward Doflamingo was fueled by the memory of Corazon. But the Joker never saw him as an equal, only as a broken toy to play with. From the start, Doflamingo controlled the pace. His strings pinned Law to the ground, dragged him across the palace, and with chilling calm, he even pulled out a pistol and shot him where he stood. But Law wasn't done. He struck with injection shot, then unleashed his strongest move, Gamma Knife. For a moment, it worked. the hope was short-lived. Doflamingo smiled, stitched his organs back together with strings, and kept walking. Then, as if to twist the knife, he taunted Law mercilessly, ridiculing his helpless state, while Law, already maimed and bleeding, struggled to stand his ground. On that palace floor, Law wasn't just beaten. He was humiliated, forced to watch the man he hated most stand tall after taking everything he had to give. And while Dressrosa showed how cruelty can break even the strongest resolve, another battlefield revealed what happens when overwhelming power makes an entire generation look like children. Kizaru versus Supernovas. Sabaody was supposed to be the Supernova's big moment. 11 rookie pirates, each with a bounty that shook the seas, all gathered in one place. The world government had every reason to worry. And then came light. Admiral Kizaru arrived, and in minutes, the dream of the worst generation standing tall was shattered. He didn't rush, he didn't roar, he just moved at the speed of light, kicking down giants like they were flies. Scratchman Apu tried his sound attacks. Basil Hawkins relied on his voodoo dolls. Urouge swelled his body to enormous size. None of it mattered. Every counter was brushed aside. Every strike met with effortless precision. The most terrifying part wasn't the damage he dealt. It was how little he seemed to care. Each move came with that lazy drawl, as if an admiral dismantling the next generation was just another boring chore. In Sabaody, the Supernovas learned the truth. The gap between rookies and admirals isn't measured in strength. It's measured in hopelessness. And hopelessness would become comedy when, years later, a captain turned his defeat into a cartoon, twisting even the deadliest battle into a joke. Gear 5, Luffy versus Kaido. On the rooftop of Onigashima, Luffy had already fallen, beaten down, bloodied, crushed under Kaido's might. But then, his heartbeat changed. The drums of liberation echoed, and for the first time in centuries, Joy Boy returned. Luffy bounced back to life with a smile. His body moved like rubber made for laughter, bending, stretching, twisting in ways that defied logic. Even Kaido, the most feared creature alive, looked confused as his opponent turned the battlefield into a playground. He grabbed lightning bolts and swung them like toys. He hammered Kaido with ridiculous over-the-top strikes. Every move carried both danger and comedy, humiliating the Emperor who once crushed him with a single blow. Kaido fought with fury, but the balance had shifted. For the first time, he was being mocked mid-battle, turned into part of a joke. And the more Luffy laughed, the more it stung. Because this was the future Kaido couldn't stop. When the dust settled, Gear 5 wasn't just a new power, it was a declaration. Even the strongest monster can be turned into a punchline. And if Kaido, an emperor, could be humiliated by laughter, imagine what it meant for the world's greatest swordsman to dismiss a rival with a dagger. Mihawk versus Zoro. On the Baratie, Zoro thought he was ready. He had challenged countless swordsmen, trained for years, and carried the weight of a promise. But then the world's greatest swordsman appeared, Dracule Mihawk. Instead of meeting Zoro with his massive black blade, Mihawk drew a tiny dagger. To him, that was enough. The insult was clear. Zoro wasn't worth Yoru. Zoro threw everything into his strikes, but every slash was deflected like nothing. Mihawk didn't sweat, didn't even step back. He was smiling, calm, amused at the gap between them. When Zoro finally exposed his chest, Mihawk ended it with one clean strike, piercing straight through. Zoro didn't fall, he stood tall, declaring he would never lose again.
背中の傷は剣士の恥だ。
Mihawk respected that spirit, but the humiliation was complete. The future world's strongest swordsman had been beaten by a dagger without his opponent even trying. And while Zoro's resolve only grew stronger, others would soon face an enemy who didn't just defeat them, he played with them like toys. Enel toys with Zoro, Wiper, Robin, and Ganfall. On Skypiea, warriors lined up to face Enel, the so-called god of thunder. Zoro with his blades, Wiper with his burning will, Robin with her calm strategy, and even Ganfall, the former god himself. Together, they should have stood a chance. But Enel didn't fight them. He mocked them. Every swing of a sword, every plan, every desperate strike, all of it ended the same way. A crackle of lightning, a smirk, and another fighter dropped to the ground. Robin's limbs were fried mid-attack. Zoro's body was scorched as if his effort was nothing. Wiper's rebellion was ended before he could even touch him. Enel never broke a sweat. He toyed with them one after another, laughing, calling their resistance pointless. To him, they weren't opponents. They were entertainment, and if a self-proclaimed god could humiliate an army of warriors, what happens when a real emperor doesn't even need to draw his sword? Shanks versus Green Bull. Green Bull marched into Wano full of confidence, overwhelming foes with his devil fruit, and boasting like the world already belonged to him. But Yamato's Supreme King Haki struck hard, and Momonosuke's dragon fire burned through his vines. Even so, the Admiral regenerated, ready to get serious. And it happened. From the sea, an overwhelming wave of Conqueror's Haki froze him in place. Shanks hadn't even stepped on land. His will alone forced an admiral to back down. An entire fight ended without a sword drawn. And if a Yonko's presence alone can send an admiral retreating, what chance does a warlord have when a rookie captain refuses to stay buried? Crocodile versus Luffy. In Alabasta, Luffy faced his first true wall, Crocodile, a warlord of the sea. Every move the rookie captain tried was shrugged off. Punches turned to dust. Kicks slipped through sand. Crocodile didn't just defeat him, he humiliated him. With a single hook, he drained Luffy of water, then buried him alive in the desert, leaving him to die. Luffy clawed his way back, refusing to give in. But their second clash was no different. Crocodile stabbed him again and tossed him aside like nothing. The message was clear. In this world, strength and experience crush stubborn will. For Luffy, it wasn't just about pain. It was the humiliation of realizing he wasn't ready yet. And humiliation would strike again on Punk Hazard, when a man built like iron was cut down in a single, effortless slash. Law versus Virgo. On Punk Hazard, Virgo had been unstoppable. His armament Haki was overwhelming, his fists breaking through everything in his way. Smoker had fallen, and the Marines themselves couldn't slow him down. Then Law stepped in, calm, cold, confident. With a single room, the battlefield was his. Virgo charged, body hardened in full haki. But Law didn't struggle. He raised his blade and cut. Not just Virgo, the entire laboratory split in two. One slash, and Virgo was done. A man who had crushed everyone else was humiliated in silence, dismantled like an afterthought. Sometimes the most disrespectful blow isn't the hardest hit. It's the one that makes everything before it look meaningless. Gear 5 Luffy versus Kizaru. On Egghead, an Admiral stepped onto the island with a mission, capture Vegapunk. But Luffy wasn't about to let that happen. The rematch began with Snakeman. Luffy pushed into Gear 4, fists flying faster than the eye could follow, but Kizaru's light was just as relentless. The Admiral slipped through, still untouchable. Then came the drums of liberation. Luffy burst into Gear 5, his body overflowing with cartoonish freedom. The ground warped, his form stretched, laughter echoing as he took the fight to the Admiral. Kizaru answered with speed and precision, even splitting into clones of light to overwhelm him. But Luffy matched the chaos with his own. Rubber gags turned deadly blows. And then it landed. White Star Gun. A fist so massive, so overwhelming, it smashed into Kizaru's head and left the Admiral momentarily paralyzed. For a moment, the light of an Admiral was dimmed. But the price of Gear 5 showed itself again. Luffy's body drained, his energy burned out by the form that turns the impossible into reality. And while exhaustion humbled Luffy, elsewhere on the seas another legend proved that sometimes you don't even need to fight. Your will alone can change the tide. Dragon versus Smoker. In Logtown, Luffy's journey nearly ended before it began. Smoker had him pinned, smoke wrapping around his body, victory certain. Then the wind changed. A storm whipped through the square, scattering Marines and breaking Smoker's hold. Out of the chaos stepped a cloaked figure, Monkey D. Dragon. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't even raise a weapon. With just his presence, Smoker froze, unable to act, while Luffy slipped free into the storm. The hero of the Marines had been humbled once before, but this was different. Here, an admiral-to-be couldn't even lift his weapon against the man the world calls the most dangerous. And if the revolutionary leader can stop a battle with nothing but a gust of wind, imagine what happens when a Marine legend throws his fists against giants. Garp versus Sanjuan Wolf. On Hachinosu, the island of the Blackbeard pirates, the battle raged. The Marines and SWORD stormed in under Garp's lead, crashing through enemy lines to rescue Kobe. Among Blackbeard's monstrous crew loomed Sanjuan Wolf, the giant of giants. But while the island trembled with gunfire and chaos, the Colossus was caught off guard, and that's when Garp struck. With one flash of movement, the hero of the Marines launched a punch so devastating, it hurled the massive Sanjuan Wolf straight into the sea. The giant barely had time to react before he was swallowed by the waves, stunned and helpless. One punch, one instant, and one of Blackbeard's greatest weapons was erased from the battlefield. If that's what Garp does to a giant, imagine what terror an Admiral can bring when he decides to toy with the entire Straw Hat crew. Aokiji toys with the Straw Hats. On Long Ring Long Land, the Straw Hats faced something they weren't ready for: an Admiral. Aokiji arrived alone, calm and casual, but the air grew heavy the moment he stepped forward. Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji tried to challenge him together, but Aokiji didn't even break a sweat. With a touch, he froze Zoro solid. Another moment, and Sanji was encased in ice. Finally, Luffy charged head-on. One move later, the captain himself was an ice statue, helpless on the ground. Aokiji wasn't angry. He wasn't even trying. He just showed the crew how wide the gulf really was, and left them alive only because he chose to. For the first time, the Straw Hats saw the reality of the new world. There are enemies who can crush them without even lifting a finger in effort. On screen, you'll find plus 1,000 aura entrances in one piece, the kind of moments that stop everything the second a character shows up. And also, when One Piece legends flex too hard, because sometimes the seas themselves can't handle that level of presence.